All right. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the Newbie Photographer Podcast. I'm your host, Nathan Holritz. Welcome to actually the only podcast that I know of in our industry specifically dedicated to new photographers. We're here to make the most important principles, the ideas that will drive the growth of a healthy business as easy to consume and understand as possible. And we actually started this series of podcast episodes with a series called I Wish I Knew. And I've been having a variety of photographers come on the show, join me to share some of the most important principles that they wish they knew when they first got started in photography. And to that end, I'm actually really privileged to have Colie, a longtime friend, I would call you, on the podcast today. Colie James is here with me. Thank you, Colie, so much for being willing to come and chat with me a little bit here on the Newbie Podcast.
Thank you for having me, Nathan. I know we were saying it before the break, but I really miss seeing you every few months.
Same. Yeah, I know. And it really did used to be kind of a regular thing. And I was thinking as we were talking, I was wondering, how long have we known each other now in the photography industry? How long ago did we meet?
2017? 2018?
Okay, so it's been 5 or 6 years, something like that?
Yeah, it's been a long time.
Yeah, well,
we first met at Photo Native when it still was in Salt Lake City for like the second or the third one, I believe.
Yeah, I remember. Oh my goodness, it was such a beautiful place for a conference too.
It
Yeah.
was.
Oh well, we could probably kind of wax eloquent about all of our experiences in the photography industry thus far. We do have a limited amount of time, and we've got a really important topic to delve into here. Before we do, I'd love for you just to briefly introduce yourself to our audience, if you don't mind.
Hey, I'm Colie James. I am a documentary family photographer and now automations and systems guru. I'm based right outside of Denver, Colorado, and I have been in business as a photographer since 2012 and added the system setup part of my business in 2020.
And dare I say, fellow nerds unite. You and I love workflow and systems. And again, we're going to talk about this more in the conversation. But the funny thing is, it's not a sexy topic. It's not like the one that everybody's yelling from the rooftops. And yet, interestingly, it affects every single one of us as photography business owners. So it's actually one of the most important conversations to have. Before we get to that, though, I just want to bring up your website really quick, Colie. And for anybody listening in, if you go to Colie, Colie James photography.com, we'll link to it in the show notes at newbiepodcast.com. You can see Colie's beautiful work. And I mean, I have to say that again, Colie, your work is just gorgeous, and it's such wide ranging, just really beautiful portrait work. And of course, for those of you listening in, you also want to go to Colie's Instagram, and you can follow, not only learn more about her photographic services, but also as she's talking about her specialty in workflow. And that's Colie James, Colie James on Instagram. And of course, I popped that up on screen earlier. Colie, we've kind of alluded to this. We've given it away already, but what is that big concept or idea that you wish you knew more about when you first started your photography business?
Getting time back, whether it is more time to do more things in my business or more time to spend with my family. We all become entrepreneurs and we end up like as hamsters in a cage, just going around and around and around, trying to build these businesses. And what we end up doing is spending and wasting a lot of time that is just not necessary.
Why do you think that is? Why do we end up in that place? Because you're right. That's a large part of why we get into business for ourselves. And yet we just kind of shoot ourselves in the foot and end up working 60, 80 hours a week or whatever the craziness is.
Yeah. So I've got two theories on that. Number one, we are just afraid to let go of control. And number two, well, actually, let's do three then. Number one, we don't want to give up control. Number two, we feel like we have to figure out how to do everything on our own. And then number three, when we know that we need help, sometimes we just can't afford it.
By the way, major props for just coming up with that on the fly. Like you're an obvious teacher and you're able to just point by point. Very, very, very cool. Okay, so I'm quickly taking notes here. You talked about control, and then very much related to that tendency to want to do things on our own. And then there's also a concern about cost. And I know probably each of those could be topics in and of themselves for a podcast episode, but we'll probably kind of allude to those here in just a second. Let me get back to the primary, I guess, topic of time and the concern for having more time in our lives, certainly to build our business, but then also to have more time with the important people in our lives. What was the turning point in your business where kind of that light bulb came on and you're like, you know what, oh my goodness, I need to be more proactive, more intentional in the way that I'm managing my time and my workflow?
So the funny thing is, and I didn't even realize I was going to talk about this, but in 2016, I had some medical issues and I lost my eyesight. And so it was forced upon me to delegate and let other people do things while I literally could not see my computer screen, could not see my camera. And in the 6 weeks that I couldn't see, and I ended up doing some sessions with a helper, I realized this is not as awful as I thought it was. So I was forced to give up control, but then I realized it just wasn't that bad. And so after that, I think it's like the floodgates opened, and I was like, okay, what else can I do to get more time back in my life? Because clearly I don't need to have my hand inside of everything in my business.
Well, and I think that's then a beautiful segue to kind of the main question at hand, which is how then did this translate to the way that you run your business? How have you found more ways to save time in your business so you can also have a life at the same time?
So the first thing that I did, which it's great that I'm talking to you, Nathan, it's outsourcing my editing. I mean, like I said, when I literally could not see my computer screen, I could not edit photos. So I ended up having a friend come in and edit the images. And when I realized that I had to give up control and someone else could do it, that literally saved me hours, not only per project, but at that point I was doing like 2 sessions a week. So it's like 4 to 8 hours back in my life of editing time. And it's like, well, what am I going to do at that time? And then, of course, it wasn't long after when I discovered my love for all things CRMs. I know CRMs probably existed, when I started my business in 2012, but they were definitely not prevalent in photographers' businesses like they are today. So those are the 2 main things that I was like, those save me hours per week, which ends up giving me just so much more time to spend with my family or to take on new clients.
So, and by the way, thanks for the shout out. For anybody listening who doesn't know, I own a company called Photographers Edit, and I'll pop that up there on the screen, photographersedit.com for anybody who's curious if you want to outsource editing. But you're right that outsourcing, delegating, editing work, whether it's in-house to an assistant or to a third-party company, one of the most, I guess, beneficial points of or incredible opportunities really when it comes to time saving is the delegation of that editing. I know that a lot of wedding photographers will spend 16 to 20 hours or even potentially more editing a wedding. And of course with portrait sessions, 4, 5, 6, 7 hours, depending on the situation, it really does eat up a ton of time. So being able to hand that to somebody else can save an incredible amount of time. And then it's interesting you mentioned the CRM, and I found a very similar thing when it came to accounting software. A lot of photographers, like the tools were right there in front of us. They weren't as refined as they are now, but whether it was taking advantage of some type of CRM system or even financial management software like QuickBooks, for example, that just wasn't the thing. Photographers were kind of, they were, had these loose receipts and they had them in boxes. Or when it came to CRM, it was probably like, I don't know, like a note document that they're writing something down on or typing something on. They weren't quite as organized. CRMs not only enable us to better manage the relationships that we have with these clients and potential clients, certainly while we're working with them, but potentially on an ongoing basis as well. What's your go-to CRM system that you're using currently?
So I currently set up for Dubsado. Now, I will say that's not the first one that I started with. I started with 17 Hats. And then after about 18 months, I moved over to Tave. And then I had Tave for 1 year. And then I moved to Dubsado. And I've been with Dubsado since the end of 2017, I believe. Yeah, the end of 2017. So, and what just prompted me to move from one CRM to the next was when I found that I was either outgrowing the CRM or that there was something in particular that was missing. I would go look for a different CRM that would give me what I craved. Now, people always ask me, but why Dubsado, Colie? Like, what's so special? As a filmmaker, the thing that Dubsado has going for it that no other CRM does is that you can embed your videos inside of your proposal or inside of a questionnaire or just in any form in general. And I found that to be very important in converting people to booking my photo plus video sessions instead of just photography.
That's really cool, actually. I've been using Loom a lot more in the last couple of months or so. It's so helpful. First of all, we talked earlier before we got started about the importance of connection in person. And if you can't do that, then of course the next best thing is to be able to send some type of video message where you can see the other person's face, expression, you can hear tone, so tone's not lost in the communication. It's so important, and that's really cool that they actually build that in.
And so the thing that I've been telling my clients, I think in the last 6 months, I started telling clients, make a welcome video on Loom. Make it quick. Tell them that you're excited to work with them if it's before the booking process, or how happy you are that they decided to work with you if it's after the booking process. but like there is no price tag that you can put on the value of connecting with your clients whenever you can. And everyone is used to video now. So if you record these short videos, I mean, a welcome video, how to access your gallery, all of those kinds of things that you would like to show them, you can record and put in a form.
Cool. That's really huge, actually. And of course, we'll link to that. As you were talking, Colie, I pulled up Dubsado on screen. For anybody who's listening in, if you just go to, and I'll pull this back up actually, you go to Dubsado, DUBSADO.com. Of course, we'll link to that in the show notes at newbiepodcast.com. Colie, you mentioned a couple of big changes that you already made or that you made in your business when you realized, okay, I need to approach business differently. I need to approach my workflow differently. I need to implement systems, a regular way of doing certain things in order to save time. Editing was certainly one of those big steps, or outsourcing, delegating editing work, moving to a CRM system. I think you mentioned to me before we got started, you've got kind of 5 big changes that you made. Is that right? Do you have 3 more? And I think you're actually muted. I don't hear you.
There we go.
There we go. Perfect.
I was coughing, so I muted myself.
No worries.
The first one is actually outsourcing my editing, because I just recommend that to all photographers. The second one is automating my communication. So as much as you can, write templates for all of the email communications, all of the questionnaires that you gather information from your clients. Number 3, which I don't really talk about a lot, but I feel like I've been talking about it more and more recently, is I time block my week. So I have a specific time where I answer emails every day, where I go into my CRM and check the progress of my clients, where I edit, where I blog, those kinds of things.
Yeah.
Number 4, which has been crucial for me lately, is staying out of my inbox. I am one of those people that will check my email all day, every day, if someone let me. And then number 5, which is really related to the CRMs, is creating a consistent client experience.
Okay, and I'm just taking, you may have seen me looking down, I'm taking notes here on a notebook as you're talking, kind of old school. So creating a consistent client experience. Now, let me just kind of backtrack, because these are all very interesting points. We talked about outsourcing editing but then number 2, automating communication. And then when I think about CRM, that feels like a way that we can also, or that's an element of a CRM, right? Which is to automate some of that communication. You create some of those templates, and that just helps ultimately streamline the communication process. The caveat, I guess, to that is that we don't want the communication to come off robotically. I heard from somebody that I know, I won't give out names, but I just heard from somebody that I knew this morning, or last night, I guess it was, I got a text message from somebody who was asking me to do something. And you could tell right off the bat that it was a template text message that they were sending to probably a bunch of people, just customizing with my name. And I gave them a hard time about it, because I've known them and I can do that. I'm like, come on, you can do better than that. But how do we minimize, in that effort to automate the communication process, which I put a lot of value in it as well, how do we also minimize coming off robotic to that client or potential client?
So I send my clients a lot of automated emails. There is one in particular, the very first one after they fill out my contact form. I admit fully, this is an automated email. Clearly, I didn't just get this and send this, but I assure you that I will be in contact within the next 24 hours. But there are 2 things that I do outside of that to really let people, give them emails, but make them highly personable. So number 1 is I use a lot of GIFs. I love Schitt's Creek. I love This Is Us. Whenever I can grab GIFs that will like show an emotion, I put them inside the email. Yeah. The second thing that I do is I sound in emails exactly like I talk. So I don't try to make my emails sound really professional and use really high level language. I write them exactly like I would say it to you if you were in front of me. And so I think those 2 things together make my clients feel more like I wrote the email specifically to them, and that it's not something that says, "Thank you for contacting me. I will be in contact within the next 24 to 48 hours with the next steps." Because that was clearly written for everyone.
And also for corporate world, like 30 years ago, like it totally sounds stiff and overly formal. Yeah. It's so funny you say this, because first of all, I've encouraged my customer service team to use emojis just to communicate more effusive emotion with our clients or potential clients. But the other thing too, is even recently, as I've looked back at some of the automated responses that we do send from our system, in response to, for example, placing an order or letting our clients know that a potential or an order is ready, rather, that even some of that kind of automated communication seemed too formal, too stiff, too stuffy. And so I'm glad that you highlight the importance of using a voice, a communication style that is reflective of our normal communication style. And I think that really does go a long way. And then we have just a few minutes left. You talked about time blocking, and then the fourth one was staying out of the inbox. And in my mind, I'm kind of putting these two things together because I think one of the most, I guess, effective ways to save time, to streamline our workflow, is the way that we manage email. It still boggles my mind that most people leave their email notifications on their, their desktop, on their phone, constantly dinging, buzzing, the little badge that shows them they've got, 3,582 email in their inbox, whatever. Like, that stuff is so distracting. And while we can't minimize the importance of the communication that still needs to happen in email, the fact that we keep letting it draw us back in is just, it's debilitating ultimately. Can you comment just a little bit more on that and how you've kind of minimized that tendency?
I went through a period where I took the email apps off my phone. I went through a period where I don't have the mail. I don't use the mail on my Mac anymore. I use Gmail. And so I'm literally only looking at it when the Gmail is up in the Chrome browser. So those are a couple of things that I did, but I also turned off notifications, like you said. And it's honestly more recently when I started actually time blocking my days that now I give myself 15 minutes to organize my emails at the beginning of the day. And then a couple hours later, I have a point where I can hop in and answer the emails that are most urgent. And then I have something at the end of the day where if it's something that I didn't get a chance to answer, it's something that needs more details tomorrow, I can put it in a folder to where that's what I deal with first thing the next day. This has been just life-changing because you're always in your inbox. And it's the same thing with Instagram. I took the app off, but now I've got set time where I'm allowed 15 minutes in the morning to kind of scroll, post what I want to post in the morning. And then, later in the day, I have blocks of time where I am allowed to go in Instagram. And other times I just need to stay out because you'll spend an hour or two scrolling on Instagram, not doing anything related to your business, not really, personally giving you joy. And then you're like, well, where did my time go? Seriously.
And yet that happens over and over and over and over again for photography business owners. Yeah, it's so easy. And especially because Instagram is part of what we do for business, it's easy to even make excuses about, but I need to be in here because I need to look at, whatever. That's an interesting conversation, but it's so poignant that you talk about the time blocking, not just for email, but also for social media. The way that I look at my daily schedule, I kind of block all of those things together into something I just simply call communication. And so email and social media and phone calls, this is all under just one area of my business, which is called communication. And that's a way that I can more intentionally block off time for that purpose. And I think that's a really intelligent way to go about business. Okay, we have just about 90 seconds left here. One quick question for you. When we talk about creating a consistent client experience, you talked about using the CRM for that. I know automating consistently communicating in a particular way. Any other particular way that you're using a CRM to create that consistent experience?
I mean, just making sure that everything that you do with your photography clients is something that you can track in the CRM. Like when someone fills out a contact form for me, they get a scheduler to schedule the call. If they schedule the call, they get a little tag that lets me know that they've scheduled. When I'm sending out the offer, I'm tracking whether or not they complete the offer. And if they haven't, I send reminders. The questionnaires now are the least thing that I think of. I mean, I'm always surprised when my clients respond to the questionnaire and I get it and I'm at Disney and I'm like, oh, Dubsado must have sent them their client questionnaire. Oh, that's right. I'm photographing them in 2 weeks. So those things just allow me to look in the CRM and make sure that they've been done so that things that I don't need to think about are being done by someone else, or in this case, by the robot known as Dubsado. And those things have just really helped me make sure that I don't drop the ball on my clients.
That's great. Listen, this is we've just barely scratched the surface when it comes to developing great systems for workflow. And for anybody listening in who doesn't personally know Colie, I trust Colie, and obviously she's a really great teacher. Colie, I want to recommend that our listeners learn a little bit more about the services that you offer when it comes to helping set up systems. Can you comment on that just a little bit?
Yeah, earlier Nathan showed my website, ColieJamesPhotography.com, and you can get to Dubsado services from there, but I actually have a brand new website. It's just ColieJames.com, no photography, and that completely covers all of the things that I help people with in terms of setting up your systems and really getting a consistent and awesome client experience in your business.
Cool. And I just pulled that up on there for everybody who might be live streaming with us. You can check that out, ColieJames.com. Of course, we'll put that in the show notes at newbiepodcast.com. Colie, this was really great. I know it feels very rushed because it's such a loaded topic, but you seriously gave so much practical information in a very short amount of time. I really appreciate that. You all make sure to follow Colie James Photography and, of course, Colie James on Instagram, and as well as ColieJames.com. We'll put all of that in the show notes at newbiepodcast.com. Thank you again, Colie. Really, truly appreciate it.
It was so good to see you, Nathan. Thank you for having me on the podcast.